You've got all the books here, and they, in a way, look dead. And they also look rather forbidding. If you look around this room where we are now, I mean, these books do look forbidding. And it requires someone to give you the key, because every single book in this library has got a story to tell. And you've got to have the key to unlock the book and actually Indeed. The story. And what I think that Roger captures, and I really took my breath away when I first saw this, is the fact that there are the books that are unlocked at the back, but here are the books that are being, in a way, actually opened. And I just felt that that is, and that's what a good librarian should do anyway.
Group, and I remember you bringing 3 or 4 of us along one evening here to College Library, and you put out on a table a whole series of beautiful and extraordinary illustrated books, and you just sort of took one of them up and started telling us about it, and it was suddenly, it was almost like magic. This book sort of came alive, like sort of something in Harry Potter. The leaves sort of, and it was just a sort of fascinating. But that wasn't the lesson, because what you then said was, "Now I want each of you to choose one of these books and to go away and find about it during the term, and then in sort of successive weeks." Come back here, and one of you can explain the books. And it was just, I mean, we were really sort of challenged by this, but it was to find one could do that, and you could actually do the same thing and make the book come alive. And it's just what attention can do when you sort of focus on something. So that was very, and I suddenly had this idea, that's what I want to try. And so in a sense, though this is 50 years after and you were rather younger but this was what I wanted to convey in the picture, that it's actually it's not just as you say, sort of head and shoulders someone there. It's actually the experience of being taught, and so I wanted the viewer, as it were, to,
and that is very clearly conveyed, and each of the objects is in a sense a portrait in itself, as much as the portrait in a conventional way of Michael. And does that presumably tie in with your approach to teaching, Michael, which is the importance of doing it in front of or touching the motif, as it were, illuminates the way you convey.
You're dealing really with two things. You're dealing with the teaching, but also with rare books. And most English teachers haven't got the school doesn't possess a marvellous library like this. But I came to Eton partly because of this library. I was headhunted to found an English department way back in 1965. It was this library that attracted me. I mean, because it has so many amazing books, and I realised that these could be used for teaching. And I think that my really only main contribution to Eton has been to show, certainly the English department, how they can teach using rare books. And so it was for that reason, in a way, that I was rather keen to, if I was to have a portrait painted, I really wanted to have it painted here.
And what we haven't really said is that that Michael is, as well as being a teacher and librarian, is probably the greatest expert on Browning in the world at the moment. So, and when we were, I mean, one of the extraordinary things that he did was to take his private business group along over to Florence, because the Brownings lived in Casa Guidi in Florence, and the apartment where they lived had just been acquired by an American, the Browning Institute, and we all went along to
scrub the floors and clean the windows.
Oh,
I mean, that was it. And we did. It took us about 3 days, didn't
Yes,
it?
yes,
It's quite a large apartment and it had no furniture in it at all. So it was completely empty.
Yes.
And so consequently we scrubbed away. Can't remember quite where we slept. We must have slept in a pensione.
Pensione Annalena. Just
The Annalena, yes. Oh,
Yes,
yes,
which
that's
is
quite
wonderful.
right.
And so, I mean, this. Well, so all these things in the portrait are sort of Browning objects, but I mean the kind of presiding presence on the is Browning himself, which was, I mean, it wasn't. Well, you tell us about where the bust came from.
Oh well, the bust was found, I should think, about 60 years ago in Italy, actually supporting a garage door. It was just to keep the garage door open, and it was rescued, and it was recognised for what it was. It is the original plaster by Robert Browning's son, who was himself a painter and a sculptor, and he'd been taught by Rodin in Paris, and you can see the influence, particularly in the beard, the influence of Rodin in this bust. Pen Browning, or he was called Pen because he was Pennini, was a nickname when he was a little boy. Pen Browning was quite proud of this bust because, and if you look at it, you can see this. He said that no one could have given a more accurate bust of his father's face because he actually measured every millimetre of his father's.
Right.
And you can actually see this because this is, as I say, is the original plaster. But it's impressive. It exists in about 3 versions in marble, but we've got the original, as it were.
Yes. And could you be specific about the other
Well,
objects?
obviously, every other object in this is related both to Browning and to me. Perhaps we should start with the open book, which is here, and is in fact Elizabeth Barrett Browning's Sophocles. Now, this I discovered when I came to Eton. I didn't purchase this for the college. It had been given together with a lot of other very odd, strange books. I mean, nothing particularly valuable apart from this, by an old Etonian. And I couldn't believe it because not only is it her Sophocles, but it is actually inscribed by her, annotated throughout. And certain of the plays she obviously loved, and others were not so interesting. And I wrote an article when I was quite a young man, soon after coming here. I should have thought around about the late 60s, on this particular book, and it created in America particularly quite a lot of interest. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted that there. And I've used it, of course, in teaching. I mean, obviously. At Eton. So that's the main book. There's a little manuscript there. Now, this is extraordinary because this was originally in my collection, and in 2012 I gave my main Browning collection to the library. Now, this is a manuscript of a poem by Robert Browning, and you will say, well, how on earth did you manage to get an actual original poem? Because all his manuscripts are in major libraries, the bulk of them in Balliol College, Oxford. Well, this was a poem that was to be in a book called Jocateria, and the manuscript of that is at Balliol. And then Browning decided it's a bit repetitive, it's too close to another poem, and so he removed it literally once it had, from proof. He removed it both from the book in proof but also in manuscript. And so consequently this came up for sale, and I thought, well, it's the only opportunity I'm ever going to have of buying an original Browning manuscript. And so anyway, I couldn't afford it. I went to the auction sale. It made much higher. I couldn't afford it. And so it was bought by Quaritch of London, and I wasn't aware of that. And I went into Quaritch and I saw it there, and I said, good gracious, that's the Browning manuscript. And I said, I really wanted that, but you beat me. I couldn't possibly afford it. Anyway, so they said, well, would you like to buy it from us? And I said, they said, you needn't pay all the money now. And so for 3 months, I paid it in 3 installments. They said, you can take it. I said, no, I'll only take it once I've paid for it. And so consequently, three checks came into my account from Eton, and I eventually bought this particular manuscript. So I'm delighted it's here, and so that's why that's there.
Yes. And the
Ring of the Book. This is Browning's greatest work. This is the Ring and the Book. It's what he called his Roman murder story, and it tells the story of the murder of 3 people by a jealous count in Rome in the 1690s. Now, the reason I've always loved it, and when I was the general editor of the OUP Browning, I wanted to look into the real murder story, not what Browning says about it. He tells the story 8 times in this book. Each character tells his or her version of the story. But I wanted to know what really happened and whether Browning really got it right. And I thought that this would make a wonderful, for volume 3 in the Oxford edition, that it would make a really wonderful sort of appendix, if we could get it. It took me and a wonderful Italian woman who's a very great friend of mine, it took us 5 years to discover the full story of The Ring and the Book. But we've got it. We know exactly what happened. We know where it happened. I spent 5 complete summers walking around all the places and discovered everything. And Browning sentimentalizes it.
I find this rather sad. When I was an undergraduate, I wrote an essay on which I passionately said that Browning was right. And now you've proved it.
No, well, it's awful. The wonderful heroine who was taken away by a priest to escape her wicked husband was unfortunately having an affair with the priest, and there's proof of it. I'm afraid. So consequently, and I'm afraid so Oxford got that, the Oxford edition, and it was quite interesting because when Volume 3 appeared, the critics actually took paid more attention to Appendix A than to the actual poem. So that I had to have that on the table, obviously.
Yeah. And I was touching on earlier how successful the foreshortening of the positioning of the hands has been. The use of the hands is, I've never been taught by you, but how the movement of the hands is part of the process of teaching, and in the sense of conveying or structuring points or breaking points down. Yeah. And Roger has brilliantly brought that across with that positioning of both the positioning of the hands and the way the light falls on the hands.
Yeah, so I think that the hands are very much. That was the advantage of doing not just doing Head and Shoulders, because the hands are so much expressive of character, and that to make them a part of the picture was. But it wasn't easy to do because of course you can't hold your hands in a position like that for any period of time. So the way we did it was I asked Michael to tell me about the books while we were painting, so that actually this was. We haven't talked about the. Azulando, which is the book you're actually sort of holding in your hand, and that was mostly what you were talking about, I think. And so I just got him to, and at a certain point I said that's it.
which is manifest in the little bozzetti which survived.
Yes,
which were done at speed.
Yes.
The book that I'm holding there is Azulando, which was Browning's very last book he wrote. In fact, he received a first edition of it, and that is a first edition, on his deathbed, literally. And he was able to hold it up and say, "Oh, it looks beautiful," and that was that. He did flick through it, but that was all. But it's important because it is set in Asolo, which is a little Italian hill town in the Veneto, and it was there that Browning had a sort of revelation in 1838 when he first went there. And he dreamt of this hill town all through his life, and then towards the end of his life he did go back there and spent a whole autumn there. And is it right that I took you? And
yeah, when we were in Venice, we got the bus and we had a picnic on the top of Asolo by the castle. I remember.
So it's actually it's the artist himself had actually been there, and it had never been edited as Orlando. I mean, properly edited. I mean, academically edited, and I was lucky enough to be able to do it for Oxford. And so consequently, that has obviously a very, very important meaning to me. So meaning to Roger, meaning to the sitter. So it was.
And if it doesn't sound cliche, one of the more striking aspects of this portrait to me is the way the light that hits one side of your head as it comes through the window, and whether that was conscious or subconscious in Roger's mind when he was painting it, the relationship between knowledge and learning and light, the point of revelation, when suddenly, I've known that from having great teachers in my life, which I've been very fortunate to do. There's a point at which things just suddenly click. And there is a moment to that. It's not just it is a process, but it's also about a moment.
Yeah, I mean was very much my. As Michael said at the beginning, that I've done very few portraits, but the thing about it's always sort of struck me that there are some painters who are enormously expressive, but sometimes the actual sort of the sort of likeness is lost in that, and there are other painters who are extremely accurate, but somehow it's sort of just that's all there is to it. But I mean, my own teacher, Peter Greenham, who was a wonderful portrait painter, managed to sort of combine these sort of two things to actually to get very good likenesses, but actually also to convey this sense of a sort of meeting, which is what I think is the best portraits sort of do, and so that was very much what I've only really painted people who actually really wanted to sort of spend time with and to talk to and to try and get into the picture that sense of a sort of meeting, and so yes, and I told you about that story at the beginning of when I was at school here, of Michael bringing the books alive, and in fact we did that in the evening, but doing it here in the sort of daylight, I could actually use the light to. That it's actually coming in a sense over Michael's shoulder and bouncing off the book and coming to the viewer. So
what I think is really interesting is you've got all the books here, and they in a way look dead, and they also look rather forbidding. If you look around this room where we are now, I mean, these books do look forbidding, and it requires someone to give you the key, because every single book in this library has got a story to tell, and you've got to have the key to unlock the book and actually the story. And what I think that Roger captures, and I really took my breath away when I first saw this, is the fact that there are the books that are unlocked at the back, but here are the books that are being, in a way, actually opened. And I just felt that is, and that's what a good librarian should do anyway. I mean, whatever age the student is, and can be of any age, they must be, just give them that little bit of help. They do the work, but you give them the key. And that, I think, and this is what this picture says.